The galaxy was old. Civilizations had risen and fallen long before humanity even learned how to walk upright. Great empires stretched across thousands of worlds, their banners flying on planets where the soil itself had forgotten its first people. The stars had seen countless wars, fought for pride, fought for resources, fought because someone wanted more than what they already had. By the time humans finally reached the stars, they were late to the game. They were newcomers, fragile and untested. The alien races called them infants of the void. Their ships were small, their colonies young, their fleets laughably tiny compared to the titanic war machines of the older species. To most of the galaxy, humanity was little more than an amusing curiosity. They were tolerated because they were harmless. And then the swarm came. The Kraith were not an empire in the normal sense. They were not politicians, not builders, not dreamers. They were hunger given form, a tide of living ships that devoured world after world, leaving only bones of stone and silence behind. The Kraith did not negotiate. They did not make peace. They only consumed. When their first fleets tore into the Orion Arm, panic swept through the settled worlds. The Galactic Council gathered in their shining chambers, voices raised in fear. Their decision was swift and cold: retreat. Fall back from the Kraith's path, sacrifice the outer colonies, let them burn and gather strength deeper inside the safe territories. When the order reached humanity, it came like a knife in the back. The colonies of Cygna, Vespera, and Eridan Rift were told to evacuate, to abandon their homes, to run. To the Council, they were expendable. To the humans, they were everything. The Council expected obedience. They had given the same command to countless younger races before, and those races had obeyed. But humanity was not like the others. Humanity had grown on a world where survival meant standing against storms, predators, and endless wars of their own making. They had learned something deep in their bones. Some ground cannot be surrendered. Some lines cannot be crossed, and so, when the retreat order came, humanity said no. It wasn't a grand declaration. There were no trumpets, no parades, no speeches broadcast across the stars. It was a simple refusal, spoken in quiet words over military channels. We will not retreat. We will hold. The alien empires laughed. They said humans were reckless, foolish. They said it was suicide to stand against the Kraith. They said humanity was about to be wiped out of the galaxy forever. But on the edge of settled space, the humans prepared. The UNS Vigilant held position above Vespera, its crew working day and night to patch its aging hull. On Cygna, civilians stripped mining lasers from their drills and welded them onto cargo haulers, turning them into makeshift gunships. Marines dug trenches in alien soil, their armor dented and scratched but their rifles ready. Families refused evacuation shuttles, choosing instead to stay in the homes they had built with their own hands. Everywhere there was fear, but fear did not break them. It hardened them. When the Kraith swarm finally arrived, it came like the closing of night. Their ships were endless, blotting out the stars with black, chitinous hulls that writhed like living beasts. Their screeches poured across comms, so loud and alien that some crewmen wept just hearing them. The sight of the swarm was enough to make entire species surrender without firing a shot. But humanity did not surrender. The Vigilant was the first to fire. Its cannons lit up the void, and for a brief moment the humans stood alone against the darkness. The alien observers, watching from afar, expected them to break within minutes. They expected the humans to flee or beg or die quietly. Instead, they saw something else. They saw a ship that fought until its hull cracked in two, until its engines sputtered and its reactor burned. They saw a crew that refused to surrender, detonating their core rather than letting themselves be consumed. And then, from behind, more human ships arrived. The Endurance, the Resolute, the Defiance. Small ships, underpowered ships, but each one came forward with the same fire in their hearts. They didn't wait for reinforcements. They didn't ask for permission. They simply fought, because behind them lay their homes, their families, their future. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy saw prey that bit back. On the alien networks, the battle was broadcast live. Some laughed at the humans' desperation. Others felt a chill crawl down their spines as they watched humanity refuse the one thing every other race had always chosen: retreat. The Kraith had expected an easy feast. Instead, they found resistance. The humans were not winning, not yet. But they were not breaking either. Every ship lost slowed the swarm. Every soldier fallen bought another hour. Every refusal to yield turned fear into fury. In the cold dark of the galaxy, on fragile colonies barely older than a generation, a message was being written in fire and blood. Humanity would not run. Humanity would not retreat. And in that moment, the real war began. The swarm did not stop. From the dark, the Kraith came in numbers too vast to count. Their living ships swam through the void like predators in an endless ocean, their bodies covered in black carapace that shimmered with poisonous light. Every movement of the swarm echoed hunger. Every shriek across the comms carried the same message: devour. For the colonies of humanity, this was the storm they had been told to flee. The Galactic Council had already abandoned them. The stronger races had already retreated to safe sectors. And yet, here at the edge of the Orion Arm, fragile ships and brave crews prepared to do what the galaxy thought was impossible: stand their ground. The first clash came above Vespera. The vigilant, old and scarred, led the charge. Its captain, a man with gray at his temples and fire in his eyes, ordered full power to weapons. The ship's cannons thundered, beams of plasma and slugs of steel cutting into the swarm. The first Kraith ship died screaming, its body splitting apart like shattered bone. But for every one destroyed, 10 more appeared. The Vigilant fought until its hull was torn open. Its shields failed, its engines burned, but even then it kept firing. Only when the reactor reached overload did the captain give his final order: detonation. In a silent burst of white light, the Vigilant took half a dozen enemy ships with it. That was the first human message to the swarm: if we fall, we take you with us. The galaxy watched from afar. Alien fleets hung just beyond the fight, refusing to join, but their eyes were fixed on the strange humans. They had expected retreat. They had expected begging. They had expected screams of despair. Instead, they saw something terrifying: ships throwing themselves into battle with no thought of survival, soldiers turning death into a weapon. Next came the Endurance, then the Resolute. Their names seemed almost prophetic. Outnumbered, outgunned, they still charged into the swarm, their hulls glowing red from enemy fire. Crews fought until their decks were open to space, until their oxygen ran out, until their hands bled from holding their weapons. And still, they fought. On Signa, the swarm landed. Thousands of Kraith beasts poured onto the surface, their twisted limbs cutting through steel and stone. The colony's defenders had no heavy weapons, no advanced technology. What they had were miners, farmers, workers, ordinary people who refused to run. They turned drills into spears, mining lasers into cannons, and cargo lifters into ramming machines. Children carried water and messages through tunnels. Mothers and fathers stood on the front lines with rifles too heavy for them, firing until their shoulders cracked. Marines in battered armor became legends, holding streets for hours against endless waves. The ground ran red, and still the humans did not surrender. For 9 days, Signa-held alien commentators spoke with disbelief. Some laughed cruelly, saying humans were throwing their lives away for nothing. Others began to whisper in awe. Never had they seen such defiance. Never had they witnessed a species fight with this much fury for colonies so young. The Kraith themselves began to notice. They had faced countless prey before, races that fled, races that collapsed, races that begged for mercy. But these humans, they fought even when death was certain. They fought even when all hope was gone. The swarm could consume flesh and bone, but it could not consume this spirit. On the 10th day, the humans lost Signa. The swarm drowned the city in fire and silence. But by then, the damage was done. For every human who fell, 3 Kraith bodies lay beside them. The swarm's advance slowed. Its endless tide hesitated. For the first time in memory, its feast had cost it dearly. Back in the shining halls of the Galactic Council, the elder races scoffed. "It is meaningless," they said. "The humans will burn out. Their courage will die with their colonies. They are nothing but a spark in the dark." But sparks can spread. On the colony of Vespera, broadcasts of the Vigilant's last stand played on every screen. On Earth, children watched as miners with rifles fought back alien monsters. Across every human world, grief turned into fire. Volunteers lined up in millions. Old ships were pulled from museums and refitted for war. Even planets safe from the swarm swore oaths. No retreat, no surrender. The first stand had not been a victory. Humanity had lost ships, cities, lives beyond count. But it had lit something the galaxy had not seen in thousands of years. It was not strategy. It was not logic. It was defiance. And defiance has a way of spreading like wildfire. The swarm kept moving. After Cygna fell, the Kraith spread like fire through dry grass, devouring one colony after another. Their ships poured across the skies, black shadows that blotted out the stars. Entire cities went silent overnight. Families were torn apart, and whole worlds burned until only ash and bone remained. And yet, humanity did not break. On Vespera, the colony most thought would fall within days, a single division of Marines dug in among the ruins of its capital. They had no reinforcements, no steady supply lines, and no hope of survival. Still, they fought. 9 days turned into 10, then 11. Their bodies grew thin. Their ammunition dwindled, but they held each street like it was sacred ground. Every building became a fortress, every alley a killing field. When they ran out of bullets, they used knives. When knives broke, they used stones and broken steel. When a Marine finally fell, another civilian picked up their weapon and kept fighting. The Kraith expected fear. Instead, they found fire. On Cygna's outer settlements, survivors turned into rebels. Farmers who had lost their homes melted into the forests and mountains. They built traps, they struck from the shadows, they cut supply lines of the swarm. Children carried messages through the night. Entire families became guerrilla fighters, refusing to vanish quietly. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Other races had faced the Kraith before. Empires with fleets 100 times larger than humanity's had fought them. They always followed the same path. Resist at first, then retreat when the cost grew too high. But humanity was different. They did not retreat. They did not bow. Even when their colonies burned, even when the ground shook with enemy footsteps, they found a way to resist. Every loss became a lesson. When the swarm broke through a shield wall, humans learned to build fallback points in layers. When the Kraith adapted to human rifles, engineers modified them with scavenged parts, firing rounds faster and hotter. When the swarm swarmed too close, pilots rammed damaged ships into their largest vessels, turning wreckage into weapons. Each defeat forged them harder. Each death made the living fight with more fury. Humanity was bleeding, yes, but they were also learning. The Council could no longer ignore them. Across the galaxy, broadcasts of human resistance played on every channel. Soldiers standing knee-deep in rubble, still firing. Civilians welding mining lasers to cargo ships and throwing themselves into battle. Children singing old Earth songs while hiding in bunkers as the ground shook above them. Many laughed at the madness of it all. But others felt something stir in their hearts. Among the Vayari warrior clans, younger soldiers whispered that they would rather die like a human than live as a coward. Among the cautious Solari, commanders studied the desperate human tactics with fascination, noting how effective they were against the swarm. Even in races that despised humanity, the question began to spread. How are they still standing? The Kraith themselves began to change their approach. For the first time, they slowed their attacks, sending more ships, more beasts. They had learned the humans would not fall quickly. Every planet became a battlefield, every orbit a graveyard, and yet in every graveyard, there burned a spark. On Vespera's 12th day, when the Marines were finally surrounded, they sent one last transmission. The signal went across every human channel, and through stolen relays it spread across alien networks too. The Marine commander, bloodied and battered, stood tall before the camera. His voice was calm, his eyes burning. "We are the line. The swarm will take this world, but they will choke on it. Tell Earth. Tell the colonies." We stood. Then the transmission cut and silence followed. But that silence carried a roar. On Earth, millions of volunteers enlisted the next morning. In hidden colonies, factories that once built farming tools now forged rifles and armor. Across the stars, humans whispered the same words again and again. We stood. The Kraith thought they were consuming humanity. Instead, they were forging them. From every broken city, fire rose. From every loss, a lesson. From every grave, a vow. The galaxy had expected humans to be prey. Instead, they were watching prey become predators. The Kraith were powerful, unstoppable, eternal. But for the first time, they felt hesitation. For the first time, the swarm had found prey that fought like hunters. And in the ashes of their burning colonies, humanity began to discover something terrifying. not just for the swarm, but for the entire galaxy. They were becoming stronger with every loss. The war dragged on. Every week brought new reports of colonies lost. Cities turned to ashes. Names of fallen ships filled the channels. Resolute, endurance, bravery, remembrance. Each one became a ghost carried in the hearts of those still fighting. Humanity was holding, but the cost was unbearable. Millions were dead, and still the swarm advanced. On Earth, families wept as news came of fathers who never returned, of daughters lost on burning worlds. Yet even in grief, people clenched their fists tighter. Factories thundered day and night. Volunteers lined up in endless rows, their faces young and old, tired but determined. Humanity was bleeding, but it was not bowing. Far away in the shining halls of the Galactic Council, the older races debated endlessly. From their safe worlds, far beyond the front lines, they looked down at humanity's struggle with cold detachment. The humans waste their strength, one delegate declared. Their defiance is admirable but meaningless. They cannot win against the swarm. They will burn out soon, another agreed. Their colonies are falling one by one. The Kraith will consume them. Better to let it happen and weaken the enemy for the rest of us. To the Council, humanity was nothing but a pawn, a buffer, a sacrificial line that would slow the swarm while the older empires gathered strength. They saw no future for the stubborn newcomers. But the galaxy outside their chambers told a different story. On alien networks, the images of humanity's resistance spread like fire. Soldiers in battered armor holding ruined streets, civilians turning their homes into fortresses, children singing while carrying supplies through tunnels. These images reached races across the stars, and the whispers grew louder. The stubborn ones, the ones who do not run. Still, whispers did not stop the swarm. The breaking point came at Eridan Rift. The rift was a cluster of shattered moons and broken asteroids, scarred by ancient battles long before humanity existed. It was also the last defense line before three major human colonies, worlds too large, too full of life to ever be abandoned. If the rift fell, the swarm would pour into the heart of human space. The humans gathered every ship they could. Old freighters refitted with weapons, frigates pulled from reserve fleets, cruisers that had survived a dozen battles. Their numbers were pitiful compared to what the Kraith were bringing, but they had no choice. Behind them lay billions of lives. When the swarm arrived, it was like a storm across the stars. Thousands of Kraith ships, more than humanity had ever faced, swam forward in endless waves. Their bodies pulsed with sickly light, their claws tearing through space itself. Against them stood barely a tenth of their number in human ships. The Council watched from afar, certain this would be the end. Some even cheered quietly. At last, they whispered, the humans will fall. The swarm will thin itself and we will pick up the pieces. But the humans did not fall. From the first moment they charged. The Defiance rammed a Kraith Leviathan head-on, tearing both ships apart in a fireball that lit the rift. The Glory stood in the center of the swarm for 6 hours, holding the line while dozens of smaller ships retreated and regrouped. Every captain knew they were not coming back, and yet every one of them fought like their death could turn the tide. The battle was chaos. The rift itself burned as asteroids shattered under the fury of weapons. Human ships screamed across comms, calling out last goodbyes, singing old Earth songs as their hulls cracked. Even when surrounded, crews refused surrender. They overloaded reactors, detonated warheads at point-blank range, anything to slow the swarm for just one more second. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. This was not strategy. This was not logic. It was madness, madness that refused to bow, and for the first time the Kraith slowed. The swarm, always fast, always overwhelming, hesitated. They had never faced prey like this, prey that turned death into a weapon. But hesitation did not save the humans. Their numbers were too few. Ships burned one after another. The line at Eridan Rift trembled, ready to break. Humanity had thrown everything they had into the fire, and it was not enough. On the final day, when the rift was nearly lost, transmissions reached Earth. Desperate voices filled with static, carrying the same words again and again. We are holding, but we cannot hold much longer. Earth heard. For too long, the homeworld had stayed quiet, sending only what it could spare, hiding its true strength. Earth had been preparing in silence, waiting for the moment when hesitation was no longer an option. And when Eridan Rift cried out, Earth answered. Far beyond the battlefield, engines the size of mountains roared to life. Ships larger than anything humanity had ever revealed rose from the shadow of the blue planet. Names carved into their hulls gleamed in the sunlight. Titan, Atlas, Unbroken, Vengeance. The Council had said humanity was weak, that they were finished, that they would burn out. But Earth was about to speak, and when Earth spoke, the galaxy would listen. The cries from Eridan Rift reached Earth like a knife through the heart. Broken voices carried across space filled with static and desperation. We are holding, but we cannot hold much longer. On Earth, every person who heard those words felt the same fire ignite inside them. The Council had ordered retreat. The galaxy had mocked their defiance. But humanity had endured, bleeding and burning, holding against the tide when no one else dared. Now, it was Earth's turn. For years, humanity's homeworld had been preparing in silence. While colonies fought on the front lines, Earth's hidden shipyards had worked without rest. Deep beneath oceans, inside hollowed mountains, and within secret orbital stations, vast war machines were built. These were not the small, fragile ships the galaxy had laughed at. These were giants. When the first of them rose, the skies of Earth shook. The Titan was the largest warship humanity had ever created, a fortress that dwarfed cities. Its cannons could split asteroids. Its armor layered thicker than anything the Swarm had ever faced. Beside it flew the Atlas, carrying entire regiments of soldiers ready to drop into battle. The Unbroken, named for every colony that had refused surrender, gleamed with weapons never before revealed, and following them came ship after ship, a fleet so vast it darkened the stars above Earth. For the first time, the true strength of humanity was revealed. The Council was stunned. The other races, watching from afar, fell into silence. They had believed humans too weak, too young to stand among them. But now, as Earth's fleet prepared to depart, the galaxy understood a truth they had ignored. Humanity had been preparing all along. When the Armada jumped into the rift, the battlefield was already drowning in fire. Human ships that had fought for days were breaking apart, their crews screaming final words into comms. The Kraith surged forward, victory within their grasp. The Swarm roared, sensing the feast ahead. Then space itself trembled. The Titan arrived first. Its shadow fell across the rift like a mountain drifting through the void. Before the Swarm could react, its main cannon fired. A beam of burning light cut through space, piercing a Kraith Leviathan clean in half. The explosion tore a hole in the Swarm so large it lit the battlefield brighter than a star. The Kraith shrieked in confusion. They had never faced such a weapon. Moments later, the Atlas unleashed its fury. Drop pods rained from its hull like falling stars, slamming into Kraith ships and tearing open their shells. From inside, human marines stormed the creatures' bodies, carving them apart from within. The Swarm was used to prey fleeing before its claws. Now prey was climbing into its jaws with knives in hand. Everywhere, names carved into steel became oaths of war. The Vengeance swept through the battlefield, its engines burning hot as it rammed into Kraith warships, tearing them apart. The Defender of Signa unleashed volley after volley, each shot carrying the memory of the colony that refused surrender. The surviving ships from the rift, battered and broken, wept as they saw the fleet arrive. Crews who had been preparing for death now cheered, their voices raw with disbelief and joy. Reinforcements had come. Not just reinforcements, Earth itself had come. The galaxy watched in awe. The feeds of the battle spread across every world, every species. They saw humans not as prey, not as victims, but as something else entirely. They saw a species that had held the line with scraps and rust, now unleashing weapons forged in silence. For the first time in the history of the Swarm, the Kraith faltered. Their endless tide met resistance too strong to drown. Their ships died faster than they could consume. Their roars turned from hunger to confusion, then to fear, but the humans did not stop. They pressed forward with everything they had, voices rising in defiance on every channel, one message repeated, spreading from ship to ship, from soldier to civilian until the entire fleet roared it together. No retreat, no surrender. It was not just a battle cry. It was a promise. Eridan Rift, once a graveyard, became a battlefield of hope. Human ships burned, yes, but now the Swarm burned with them. For every vessel humanity lost, the Kraith lost more. For every soldier who fell, 10 more charged forward to take their place. And at the center of it all, Earth's fleet carved a path through the darkness, a spear of light against the endless night. The Council had said humanity would collapse. The galaxy had said they were too weak. The swarm had believed they were just another prey. But when Earth spoke, the universe listened, and the sound was fire. The Battle of Eridon Rift changed everything. For weeks, the galaxy had believed humanity was finished. The swarm had been unstoppable, and the Council had already prepared speeches of necessary sacrifices. The other species watched from afar, shaking their heads. Certain Earth's defenders would be nothing more than a forgotten footnote in history. But when the feeds of the battle reached every world, silence followed. Billions of eyes stared at their screens as human warships carved through the swarm. They watched humans fight until their ships cracked apart, and still they pushed forward. They saw a fleet that should not have existed, built in silence, hidden beneath oceans and mountains, now unleashed in fury, and something shifted. In taverns, marketplaces, and crowded city squares across the stars, whispers began. If humans can fight, why not us? Some spoke it as hope, others as shame. For too long the galaxy had looked away while the swarm devoured. But now they had no excuse. If one of the youngest races could stand, what did it say about those who hid? On the desert world of Turvak, young soldiers begged their leaders to join the humans. On the icy colonies of Corral, workers threw down tools and demanded ships be sent. Even in the polished chambers of the Council itself, voices rose louder than ever, accusing leaders of cowardice. The Council had mocked humanity. Now their people mocked them. Meanwhile, the humans kept fighting. The rift became a storm of fire. The Titan tore apart leviathans that had once been thought indestructible. The Unbroken led desperate charges straight into the swarm, emerging scarred but never defeated. And the smaller ships, those battered survivors who had held the line before Earth's fleet arrived, now fought with renewed fury. They were no longer alone. Yet victory was not certain. The swarm still numbered in the millions, their endless tide pressing from every side. For every Kraith leviathan destroyed, 2 more rose from the abyss. Entire human crews gave their lives just to buy minutes of survival. Eridon Rift was becoming a graveyard of both heroes and monsters, and then the first allies arrived. It began with the Turvak. Their sleek warships, painted with desert sigils, broke through the rift in a blaze of fire. For centuries they had hidden behind their council's words of caution. But now their warriors roared through the comms, promising vengeance. "We stand with Earth." Not long after, the Corrali ships appeared. Enormous ice-armored carriers entered the fight, each carrying swarms of strike craft. Their pilots dove into the Kraith like meteors, cutting apart the swarm in blinding arcs of light. More came. The Hisari sent their flame lances, weapons feared across 100 wars. The Veyron, once too proud to bleed beside lesser races, arrived with fleets of silver that glittered like knives. And with every ally that joined, the humans grew stronger. The Council tried to claim credit, broadcasting messages of unity and prepared strategy. But everyone knew the truth. It was not the Council who had inspired this war. It was humanity. It was the sight of fragile ships refusing to break, of Marines climbing into the jaws of monsters with knives in their teeth, of voices shouting, "No retreat, no surrender." The galaxy was no longer watching in silence. The galaxy was awakening. Back on Earth, people gathered in streets, staring at the feeds with tears in their eyes. Families who had thought their loved ones lost now heard the chants of victory. Children pointed at the stars, no longer afraid of what lurked in the dark. Humanity, once mocked as too small, too weak, was now the spark that lit an entire galaxy on fire. But the cost was heavy. Every hour, names of fallen ships scrolled across the screens. The defender of Cygna was gone, destroyed after ramming a swarm leviathan. The Vengeance had broken apart, its crew singing old Earth songs until the end. Even the mighty Titan bore deep scars, smoke pouring from its wounded hull. And still the humans fought. The allies, inspired by their defiance, rallied harder. Entire fleets once hidden were now rushing to the front. The war that had seemed lost was no longer a quiet death. It was becoming something new, something brighter, fiercer. The Kraith had thought themselves eternal. They had thought no prey could resist them. But now for the first time, they tasted fear. On every world, in every language, the same words were whispered, shouted, sung. If humanity can fight, so can we. And in the rift among the endless fire, a single truth burned brighter than any star. This was no longer humanity's war alone, it was the galaxy's. The war reached its breaking point. The swarm had not stopped. Even after Eridan Rift, even after the galaxy joined the fight, the Kraith came harder, hungrier, endless as the tide. Whole regions of space turned into graveyards. Fleets clashed day and night, and the stars themselves seemed dimmed by the fire of war. Yet humanity refused to fall. Every world that had once been a ruin was now a fortress. Cities rebuilt with walls of steel and energy cannons. Colonies armed farmers and miners, turning every citizen into a soldier. Even the smallest outposts sent their ships to join the fight. Humanity had become a chain of fire stretched across the galaxy, unbreakable, unbending. The galaxy had followed their example. The Turvak fought with desert fury, their ships streaking like blades across the dark. The Coralli moved like glaciers, slow and heavy, yet unstoppable once their weapons unleashed. The Hasari burned through the swarm with flames brighter than the suns themselves. All the species that had once turned away were now united. Side by side with the humans they once mocked, but the swarm still gathered. At the edge of the galaxy, near the black abyss of a dying star, the Kraith revealed their heart. A colossal hive ship, larger than moons, pulsed with life and power. It was the source, the mind that bound the swarm together. If it fell, the swarm would shatter. If it survived, the galaxy would drown. The fleets gathered for the final strike. Hundreds of ships from dozens of worlds. Titans scarred and battered. Cruisers patched with scrap. Carriers filled with pilots who knew they might never return. And among them all, leading the charge, was Earth's Unbroken. Its hull burned, its guns cracked, but it still stood, the flag of humanity blazing bright. The comms opened across the fleets. No council speeches this time. No politics. Just one voice, calm and strong, the voice of Admiral Reyes aboard the Unbroken. This is it. There's no retreat. No second chance. Today we end it, or we burn together. Humanity will fight. Stand with us and the galaxy will live. A roar answered from every ship. Words in 1,000 languages, yet meaning the same thing. No retreat, no surrender. The battle began. The swarm poured out like an ocean of teeth and claws. Beasts larger than cities collided with warships. Fighters darted like fireflies, vanishing in explosions. Entire fleets disappeared in moments, swallowed by the tide. But the galaxy did not break. The Turvak slammed their ships into the swarm, tearing holes through the living waves. The Coralli unleashed frozen storms, locking enemies in ice before shattering them. Human marines boarded leviathans with knives and explosives, blowing them apart from within. Every species fought. Every voice screamed. Every hand clenched tight on the weapons that could mean victory or death. The Unbroken led the charge toward the hive ship. Its guns blazed, cutting a path through endless foes. But the swarm knew. They threw everything at it, claws raking across its hull, fire tearing through its shields. Piece by piece, the mighty ship began to fall apart. Still, it pressed forward. Admiral Reyes stood on the bridge, blood on his brow, eyes locked on the hive ship. Around him, his crew fought to the last breath. "Bring us closer," he ordered. "Admiral, we won't survive." "We don't need to survive," he said, his voice steady. "We just need to finish this." The Unbroken broke through the swarm's last wall. Its hull burned, its engines screamed, but it charged straight toward the hive. Across the galaxy, every soldier, every pilot, every child watching the feeds held their breath. And then, the Unbroken rammed the hive. The impact lit the dark like a second sun. The hive shuddered, its body tearing apart, its mind screaming across the stars. Explosions ripped through its core. One by one, the swarm ships froze, their movements breaking, their unity shattering. The tide that had drowned worlds faltered, then collapsed into chaos. The swarm was broken. The galaxy roared. From the deserts of Turvak to the ice fields of Coral to the cities of Earth itself, people screamed in joy and grief. Victory had come, but at a cost written in fire and blood. The Unbroken was gone. Its crew, heroes now spoken in whispers, were names the galaxy would never forget. Humanity had not only survived, they had changed everything. No one would laugh at them again. From that day forward, when children of every species looked up at the stars, they would remember. They would remember that the youngest race, the fragile race, the stubborn race, had refused to retreat. They had stood when all others turned away. They had lit the fire that burned across the galaxy. And in the silence after the war, in the peace bought with sacrifice, one truth remained. Humanity had taught the galaxy how to fight, and the galaxy would never be the same again.